Chapter 11, Part 2. So as a teacher, you can prevent most minor behavior problems by presenting interesting lessons. Oh, there it is, 3 times. Efficient use of class time, like really smooth transitions, smooth lessons, and then carefully structuring instructional activities. You want to think about everything that can go wrong. You want to think like the most deviant child in your classroom. I used to let the kids, we had these puppets that we would make so the kids could do puppet, they would do puppets where they would tell the story through a puppet and stuff like that. And they would make these little sock puppets. They loved it. But, I was working with EBD kids, so I'd be like, okay, I am giving this child a needle and thread. More than likely, they're going to stab somebody with it or stab themselves. So I'd think about all these different things, so I'd have to tell them, okay, if you have to use this needle. I don't want anybody poking anybody. I don't want you poking yourselves. Needles are very sharp. It's going to hurt. If I see anybody poking anybody, this is what's going to happen. So you got to think ahead of what's going to happen. But more importantly than anything, we want to use the principle of least intervention. So many times teachers are so quick to jump on kids because they're afraid that, if they let something slide, then they're going to be thought of as weak. But sometimes it's just the simplest method. The main goal in dealing with routine misbehavior is to do it in such a way that it both affects and avoids unnecessary disruption in the lesson. Sometimes what you want to do is just look at the kid, right? You're just going to look at the child and give them the eye. I would, if I had put my makeup on, I'd give you the evil eye right now. I'm really pretty effective at that. I can actually do it in the grocery store and stop small children in their baskets from misbehaving. So you want to really do that. I always say go practice in a grocery store. Go practice in the mall. Giving kids the eye. Dr. Hines thinks you're going to get arrested if you do that. But that's one of the things that you want to do. Or walking by a child, just moving away from the podium, walking over to the kid, putting your hands on their shoulder. Watch out with some kids because they freak out over that. But, standing behind them, standing really close. You don't speed when the police are right next to your car. If it's all possible, the lesson must go on while behaviors problems are being dealt with. So you might just walk over and tap on the kid's desk. Right? Just letting them know that you want them to get back. You might walk over. I do this in my classes now. Walk over and shut somebody's computer because they're not paying attention. A continuum of strategies for dealing with minor behaviors from least disruptive behaviors is on the next slide that I'm going to show you. It's on, and if you're listening, if you go back to your book, it's on 11.1. So prevention. Teacher displays enthusiasm, varies activity, and keeps students interested. Nonverbal cues. Tanya turns a paper in late and the teacher frowns. Just giving that disapproving look sometimes will do it. Or you can give the excited look. Some kids are really doing something you really like. You can just keep looking at them and shaking your head. Praise a correct behavior that is incompatible with the misbehavior. So some kids are talking, gosh, I really like the way this group over here is real quiet. Some of the books talk about using kids' specific names. Like, I really like the way Susie is. The older the kids get, the less you want to use that, because then they start to think they're like, oh yeah, everybody wants to be like Susie. Oh, and then it kind of signals that child out as a goody two shoes, and everybody hates them. So what you want to do is just praise, like you say, I really enjoy when everybody does blah 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 blah. I used to also do things like, gosh, I must be a terrible teacher, because I thought I taught my students and that they learned that they're not supposed to talk when I'm talking. I would also do things like, Marcus, remind me that I need to make an appointment with my doctor. And he'd be like, all right, you need to make an appointment. Why? When do you want me to remind you? I go, well, because you see, why? Is something wrong? I say, yeah, I keep hearing voices, and my students know that when I'm talking, no one else is supposed to be talking. So I must be going crazy because I keep hearing voices. And so they would look at me like, they said, ha, ha, ha. And they said, oh, no, you're not crazy. We're just talking. So praising other students is good. I like that most of you turned in your paper on time. I really appreciate that. Some kind of verbal reminder, remember everybody, we're all supposed to have eyes on me. That teacher that did the whole roll call and stuff like that she was doing her little chants with, she was doing those little verbal reminders too. You want to repeat it often. And it's not a bad thing to repeat it often. It typically takes us at least 3 or 4 times to hear something before we remember to do it. And then know that there are consequences. Tanya spends 10 minutes after class starting on the next paper assignment. So she's going to have some kind of consequence that's going to go along with that. And usually your consequences you want to keep to be the first 3 to 4 of them, you want to make sure that they remain in your classroom. So it might be a verbal warning. You might get 2 verbal warnings. And that would be what you want to really look at. So one of the things you also want to look at is the easiest behavior problem to deal with are those that never occur in the first place, right? So if you can prevent misbehavior, that's the most important thing that you want to do. Once again, time number 4, we want to present interesting and lively lessons. When you're excited about something, when you're excited about a lesson, kids can't help but be excited about it. If you're like, well, class, today we are going to be regrouping with fractions. Today we are going to be learning about photosynthesis. My son and no, I think my daughter, yeah, I think she did have her. But anyway, he would say to me, Mom, it's so boring in chemistry. The woman has like the most boring voice ever. He says, I can't, it's so hard for me. I fall asleep almost every day in class. And this kid was a good kid. And he really tried to be a teacher pleaser. And so my husband and I went to parent teacher, when you shadow day or shadow night and you go to all your teachers' classes, and she was going over the curriculum. And I thought, oh my God, he is so right, because I wanted to fall asleep and all she was going over the curriculum. According to the Sunshine State standards, your student will be learning. I mean, there was no inflection in her voice. There was no excitement about chemistry. There was no, this is the most interesting thing I've ever done in my life. Chemistry is my lifeblood. There was none of that. Juxtapose that with Ron Clark. When you walk in there, I mean, he makes like anything seem like the most important thing ever that goes along. He dances with the kids. If the kids get something, he'll say, all right, boys and girls, if you're going to get this question right, I know this is really, really hard, but let's get it. And if you get it right, I'll be pushing the magic button. And he's got this button that actually when he pushes it, disco lights come on and music comes on. And there's like flashing strobe lights and stuff. And the kids get up and dance for like 35 seconds. But if they get the problem right, they get to do that. And it's so exciting. And we were all laughing because you got to get it right. So making classroom rules and procedures clear, keeping students busy. When children misbehave, typically is at the beginning of class and at the end of class, because that's when you guys have downtime. When you don't plan bell to bell, when you don't plan from the beginning of this class to the end of the class, then that's when kids typically get out of hand. And then using other effective techniques of basic classroom management, like hurdle help, when you're telling kids that you're going to help them. Humor, when you use humor. One of the other ones that I used humor a lot. My students would say stuff to me like, I told you, I taught bad kids. So this isn't like a normal classroom. But they would say, the kids that were considered to be bad, they would say, you're a whore. And I would say, my sex life has nothing to do with you doing your schoolwork. I very well could be. They would look at me like, did she just say she was a whore? And it doesn't matter. Even if I am, it has no bearing on you doing your schoolwork. And they would just blink at me. Or your mother's a whore. She could be. There's 4 of us, maybe. Seems kind of personal. I've never asked her. Seems kind of like a personal question. So if you just kind of like let it roll off your back, like, why did you give us this? You're so mean. You're right. Actually, I did do this. At my first day of class, I would always tell the kids, there's only 2 things you need to know about me. I'm the meanest and ugliest teacher you're ever going to have in your life. And then they'd look at me and their eyes would get really big. And so later on when they go, you're so mean, I go, I told you that first day. I'm so excited because that means that you learned something. Chalk one up for Miss P. And they would just look at me and shake their head. Actually, when new kids would come in the class, they'd shake their head and look at them and say, don't even try, because you can't get to her. She doesn't really get angry about this kind of stuff. Nonverbal cues really, really helps with making eye contact, moving kids close to a kid when they're misbehaving. We already talked about light hand on the shoulder. Also, if that doesn't work, those nonverbal cues doesn't work. I used to do this with kids too. I had like a secret signal, and I would meet with the child afterward. I would have this one kid, Dennis in particular. I did this with him a lot. He was so he would, ooh, 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 Miss P, and he was always doing goofy things in class. And it was all attention seeking. That's all he did was wanted his peers' attention or my attention. And so I would pull him out and I said, I was like, Dennis. And he's like, yeah. I go, you know what? I have taken a lot of psychology classes. I actually have like a minor in psychology and I'm going to get my master's in psychology. And I have a lot of classes in psychology. And I just want to tell you something. what you're doing right now, your behavior tells me that you want my attention. And I love you and I care about you so much that I want to give you my attention. But I'm teaching class. I can't give you one-on-one attention, buddy. I just can't do it right now. It's impossible. I got all those other kids in the class. So I'll tell you what. I'll spend lunch with you. We can spend some time after school. You can even come before school, and we will just spend some quality one-on-one time, because it seems to me like you're going through some pretty serious Piechura withdrawals. No, I'm not. Yeah, I know you don't know it. It's this thing, it's subliminal, like it's your subconscious, and you don't even realize it. And but I'm telling you right now, ask any good psychologist, and they're going to tell you, this attention-seeking behavior means you need attention and you want my attention. I care about you so much, I'm going to give you my attention. No, Miss P, I really don't want to spend any extra time with you. Well, then I guess you should stop that attention-seeking behavior, because otherwise I'm going to have to give it to you because I care about you, buddy. And see, the difference is, instead of saying, Dennis, you're so bad and I can't believe you act out like that and you're going to spend lunch with me and I'm going to punish. Instead, I turn that around and say, hey, listen, I'm going to give you this cue when you're doing that, because otherwise I know that you need me. And they go, he'd be like, no, I don't need you. So our little cue was that I would like pull on my ear when he would start misbehaving like that. And he would straighten up so quickly and he'd start shaking his head. No. And sometimes I would keep him at lunch, or I would keep him during my planning period, or when he had time off or after school and stuff. And I would just sit there and listen to him and talk to him so that we built some kind of relationship. And that's another reason how you can prevent misbehavior, is building relationships. Praising other students, we already talked about that in the chart, verbal reminders, repeated reminders, and then applying some judicious consequences. Consequences should be related to what happened. So if a kid defaces something, they should clean it. If a kid wastes your time, then their time should be wasted. If a kid is rude to another kid, then they should have to do something that would help out their fellow students. I never made kids apologize though, because if you make a child apologize, what you're really teaching them, because 9 times out of 10 they weren't sorry, what you're really teaching them is to lie about it. And so I would say, I'm not going to make you apologize unless you really are sorry. If you're really sorry, then go ahead and apologize. But if you're not sorry, then you have to do something that's nice for the rest of the group, because we're working on interpersonal relationships here. So one of the things we're going to work on is how to be a better friend. So I want you to talk about that. And if you don't want to be that person's friend, then how do you be a courteous classmate? Because when you get a job, you're not going to like everybody on your job, but you're going to have to work with them. You're going to have to be a professional. And that means being a courteous classmate. So they would have to do something for the whole class to be courteous. And typically, after they did something like that, they would typically apologize, but it wasn't me forcing them to apologize. So some students' behaviors are not appropriate, that are not appropriate include fighting, stealing, destruction of property, and then gross disrespect for teachers and other school staff. That was another thing too. Teachers would always say, make him apologize to that person. As I said, I never made kids apologize. It was just my own thing. Other teachers do that. I really didn't, because 9 times out of 10, the kids really weren't ready to apologize when they were. And all they're learning is to repress how they feel and lie. And so one of the things that we want to do when we do that is, I would say, you have to help that teacher. You have to spend time with that teacher. You can write a letter to them about why you are angry, and your side of the story, so that their voices were heard. Because a lot of times, especially when a child was up against another teacher, they always felt as though administration always took that teacher's side. And to be honest with you, I would take a teacher's side too, typically, but there were some teachers that actually would set kids up. I mean, my husband was had a teacher that he worked with was walking down the hallway with a kid, and it was rain. It was an outdoor hallway. It was at DeLand Middle. And the teacher said to the kid, why don't you walk out there a little farther, because maybe you'll get hit by lightning and no one will care. How would you like to be like in 6th or 7th grade? And some teachers say that about you. And then the teacher had the audacity to go into the break room and laugh about it and joke about it. And so my husband went up to the kid and asked, did she really say that? And the kid said, yeah. And so he called the parents and had the parents complain because, once again, you don't want to like rat out all your teacher friends, but it does happen. So I would have the kid tell their side of the story and then the teacher tell their side of the story. And then they had to read each other's side of the story of how that child was feeling. And usually the kids could get out their feelings, 9 times out of 10, the teacher was having kind of a bad day and the kid said something smart, but the kid was having a really bad day. And the teacher had to understand where that kid was coming from too. They are far less common than routine classroom misbehaviors, but far more serious is when we have some more serious behavior problems. And more, since kids are mainstreamed more and more, and we have inclusive classrooms, typically there are 2 to 4 children in your class that are going to be labeled ESE now. In a classroom of like 22, there is at least going to be 2. Typically, most of the teachers I talk to now usually have at least 4 kids that are, have some kind of IEP. And some of them are have some pretty serious behavior problems. But if you're going to do that, and we're going to work with those kind of kids, we have something called applied behavior analysis. We talked a little bit about this in chapter 5. It works off of the behaviorism principle, but not like Skinner or anything like that. Well, it still applies some of those. But Skinner, remember, he said that, you really don't have, it's all about the rewards and it's all about the consequences and blah, blah, blah. But applied behavior analysis tries to get at the function of the behavior. And the basic principle of behavioral learning theories is that any behavior persists over time is being maintained by some kind of reinforcer. So we're trying to look at what the function of the behavior is. Sometimes you think that the behavior is a kid's being rude, but really what it is that the child has this fear of failure. That they're afraid that they're either frustrated or they're trying to escape some kind of activity because they're really fearful that somebody's going to think that they're stupid, or they're attention seeking. And they want to get attention from either their peer group or the teacher, or sometimes both. So either kids are looking for attention or they're seeking release from an unpleasant state or activity. It could be out of frustration. It could be out of boredom. It could be out of fear. Sometimes it's even out of fatigue. They don't get good night's sleeps. So when we do ABA, or applied behavior analysis, sometimes we call this a functional behavioral assessment, a FUBA, FBA. That what they want to do is they want to look at what is the antecedent to the problem. So it's ABC, antecedent, behavior, consequence. So when we do applied behavior analysis, the first thing we want to do is target the behavior. We want to look at what the target behavior is. So is it calling out? Is it cussing? Is it being on task or off task? Is it, you don't say disrespectful because disrespect means so many things to so many people. So you really have to be very specific. You have to say, the student will stop calling the teacher the following names. Will stop hitting and calling their peers the following names. Some of the things that you look at that. Now, when we're looking at a target behavior, because some of these kids come with many target behaviors, I always say start with the one that bothers you the most. And the reason that you do that is because if they're doing a behavior that really irks you, that really gets on your nerves, you're not going to like that child. And if you don't like that child, then you're not going to want to do things for them. So if you can clear up the one that bugs you the most, then you can work on the other ones. When you do that, you establish a baseline behavior. So you're going to count how many times they do it over a 3 to 5 day period. Then you're going to choose a reinforcer and criteria for reinforcement, something that is going to help change that behavior. If necessary, sometimes you have to choose a punisher, but as I told you back in chapter 5, when you do a punisher, once you remove if you don't replace the behavior with a good behavior, once you remove the punisher, the behavior is going to come back. You're going to observe that behavior over the implementation time after you put in your the change, and then you're going to see whether or not it worked. A lot of teachers want things to go away. They don't want them to just decrease. They want them to go away. I had a student that had a kid that went, she did that I think it was something like 220 times in a 3-hour period. Can you imagine somebody doing that long? And I'm sorry if I startled you if you were driving. And so she found a reinforcer for the child that I forget what it was. Something like she got to do a squishy ball or something like that. It was something really minimal. And she had to do this little squishy ball. And the behaviors, though, her squeaking and screeching went from 320 times in, 3 hours to like 40 times in 3 hours. So it was a dramatic decrease. Well, she has like some supervisor come and they said, oh my God, you have to get a handle on that screeching. And so she showed her the chart and she said, like it was 320. Now it's 40. And they went, oh my gosh, you're doing a fabulous job. Yeah, you want to get it to 0, but teachers usually want to go from 100 times to 0, or, 15 times a kid calls out to 0 times. It's going to take a little bit of time. So when the behavior management program is working, there's a reduction in the frequency. Another one that they talk about is applied behavior analysis is home-based reinforcement. And teachers give students a daily, weekly report card to take home to their parents, and then the parents give them some kind of special privileges or rewards that go along with it. I'm going to show you an example of, your book has paper examples where teachers do this, but there's new electronic examples that teachers have been using, so I'm going to show you this. This is called Class Dojo. And it's free for teachers, and the thing that you can do when you do Class Dojo is like, see it, I should turn up the sound. Let me make sure I can get the sound up on this. Hugh Jackman is participating, and then Johnny Depp, he needs a little work. He's off task. And so teachers will do this as they're working with kids, and they can walk around. You can put it on your phone, and it kind of like teachers will put it up on the board, and you can hear just the bing, 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 bing. One of the things that's also nice about this is you can actually look at the groups. Wait a minute, hold on, let me go back. Sorry. So it shows you what my whole class report is, and it will show you like how my whole class is doing. It's 67% positive. One of the things is it needs, that they are off task. You can have parent accounts and student accounts. Parents can actually log into this live during the day while they're at work. And you can set it up so that it sends them notifications of how their kid's doing. So, and as a teacher, if I go to Cameron Diaz and I look at this, I can actually go in and add a note here, and I can talk about all the great things that she's doing in the class, or I can talk about things that she's not. I can do it by the week, by today, just for one day. I can do it by the week. I can do it by the month. I can do it at all time. And then I can do the whole class. Dysinger used this in the middle school for whole class. And she would just give kids points, and you could give whole class points as well. And one of the things that was nice about this as well is that when she did this, she would compete, the different classes would compete. So the class that had the highest percentage at the end of the week got brownies on Monday. And they would list, she had a list of them on the end of the day. She would put up what the class averages for the week was, so the class would know, how close they were to being able to get that. Another thing that's kind of cute too, if I go back to my, I can download it too as a spreadsheet too. Sorry, I gotta move my thing over so I can see it. If I go back to my students, these little these little guys right here, you can change them. So you could take them to the lab, and the kids can make their own little people that goes along. You can also edit what skills you want them to do. Like I can add a skill, and I can go like here, like, being creative, and I could name it, and I could call it creative. And so, if the kid's being creative, then I can, I will, do that. If you have a specific one that the kids are working on, then you can add those in. So you can give them rewards for pretty much almost anything. So that would be an example also of a home-based reinforcement, that the parents are able to see it, and you're allowing them to interact with it electronically. For parents that don't have that, for kids that don't have internet access or be able to have email and stuff like that, you could just print that out at the end of the day, so it's not like you're not actually using it. You could print out that and send it home with the kid. Group contingency programs is like I just showed you, where you do the group goal. Some other teachers do things like a marble jar. Every time they catch a kid being good, you get a marble in the jar, and when the marbles are all full, the kids get a pizza party or something like that. Here's an example that your book shows, following directions, that they did that. We did it with points too, that we did that, and each day added up to 100 points. And then at the end of the week, the kids got to have special, like on Fridays, we had this school-wide thing where kids could go to different clubs on Fridays and you had to buy them with the points that you earned during the week. Ethics of behavior, behavioral methods, the behavioral analysis strategies described in this chapter can be really powerful. And properly applied, they will usually bring behavior of even the most disruptive students to a manageable level. However, there is danger that teachers might use such techniques to over-control kids. I was in a school where they used to actually, every 3 minutes a bell went off, and I had to not reward, but give like a little stamp to kids who were on task. I couldn't keep track of my own behavior every 3 minutes. And I was a behavior specialist there for a little while, and I have to tell you that I had worked in this other school that was much more humanistic in its approach and did not rely heavily on behavior management. I mean, we had behavior management program, but we didn't rely as heavily on behavior management techniques. And the 7 years I had worked at the other school, I had used something called aggression control techniques, actually physically having to restrain children twice. One time with a 5-year-old who was completely out of control, and one time with a teenager who I had to remove from a classroom. And those are the only 2 times I had to use it. When I worked at this behavioral center where they really, really like overly monitored these children and controlled their lives, I used it like 8 times in one day. Because it's just, you've got to let kids have a little bit of choice in their life. Probably if there's one thing I can tell you is to let kids have choice. One of the things that we have to do, that prevention program, enforcing rules, enforcing school attendance, enforcing misbehavior. School choice is a huge one, especially with adolescents. I would do this thing, it's called the parroting technique. And if a child was misbehaving in my class and had to be removed I should remove from my class, I would say, just like this, I would say, Michael, and I would get my little game show voice on. Michael, you have 3 choices. You can A, remain in this classroom and continue with the lesson. B, you can go to the back of the room and do an alternative assignment. Or C, you can go to the office. I will call someone and come get you. Which will it be? Michael, you are Michael, you are a bright, intelligent young man, and I know you'll be able to make a decision. However, you're unable to make that decision, I will make it for you. Will it be A, will you remain in your seat and continue to do your work? B, will you go to the back of the classroom and do an alternative assignment? Or C, do I have to call somebody who will come and get you? And as soon as I went into that game show voice, and I said it really fast like that, they would go like B, and they'd go to the back of the class. And I always had this packet of work that had something to do like reinforcers with that. And the nice thing about them being in the back of the room was they were still listening to the lecture or the lesson or whatever I was doing. And so they would kind of like be still involved a little bit. I rarely sent kids out of my room, because when you send kids out of your room or have somebody who will come and get them, you're really giving up your power and authority over that child. And I would when I was a behavior specialist and teachers would do that, they'd say to me, I saw him in your office and he was laughing. And I would say, yep, he was. And they would say, I sent him there because he was being so totally disrespectful. And I'd say, you know what, if you really want to punish him, keep him in your room. That's what I wanted to say. I didn't always say that. I did say it a couple times though. But I'd say my job as a behavior specialist is to get that kid ready to learn and back in your classroom as soon as possible. If you want me to punish the child, then send me a note that says punish him. Put him on the racks, tack his tongue up to the bulletin board, whatever. Because that's not my job. My job is to get him back in the classroom, because when he's sitting in my office, he's not learning. And he's already behind. So you want to have that prevention programs. You want to keep them in your classroom somehow. You want to make sure that your class is warm and inviting so that they want to be in school. So to prevent serious behavior problems, we're going to do that. Prevention programs, identifying those causes of misbehavior, making sure you enforce rules and practices. I had kids that this teacher was so lackadaisical that she would be, kids like structure. So they would come into my room and sit down. I'd be like, David, I don't have you this period. And he'd go, I can't go in Miss Reese's class, Miss P. I can't be in there. I want to go away this weekend. I've got some kind of special thing going on this weekend. And if I get in trouble, I'm really going to have a really hard time. Please just let me stay in this class. And I'd have to call the principal and say, listen, I got David in my class. He's supposed to be in Reese's class, but he's not going in there because he's going to lose it in there because she has no classroom management. And so he said, please just let me stay in the back of the class. I promise I won't be a bother. How sad is it that a child has to police himself like that because there's no classroom management in a classroom? And that's that idea of enforcing that kids know what to expect when they come into your room. And then that idea of enforcing school attendance. I enforce attendance when we have regular classes. That tells me that you're a responsible adult. And attendance is one of those things that helps you when you have a job. If you miss a job, you don't go to your job and you only have it an hour a day, 5 days a week, as young kids do. Then you're trying. When I would teach middle and secondary, I say, you're trying to tell me that you can't handle this. You're going to get fired. Practicing intervention, classroom management strategies that can help it reduce that inappropriate behavior, making sure that you have routines that you follow. You want to ask your parents to be involved, and don't just call them when the kid's bad. Set up a rapport before you know the kid. Before that kid gets in trouble. Ron Clark makes all of his teachers memorize every kid's parent's name and every child's name prior to school starting, so that everybody, that when the kid comes in, everyone knows it. Peer mediation works really good. One of the things that we use that we're doing is setting up restorative practices in schools. We have a restorative practices center, and they use these basic questions right now. And to help kids to respond to a challenging behavior, you say, what happened? Everybody in the school responds the same way. What were you thinking at the time? What have you thought about since this, whatever the serious infraction was? Who has been affected by what you have done? So you're kind of saying, what is your actions? What kind of effect has it had? In what ways? And then what do you think you need to do to make things right? So you're kind of giving the kid a way out. And then this is what you say to help those harmed by someone's actions. And the whole school asks those same questions every time a behavior happens. What do you think? What did you think when you realized what had happened? What impact has this incident had on you and on others? What has been the hardest thing for you? And then what do you think needs to happen to make things right? So that both sides are telling their side of the story, and the kids sit around in a circle time, they call it, and it's like in a judge-free zone, and they kind of work out these problems that are coming up with it. And that's another way that if you use restorative practices that you kind of confront bullying, that bullies can kind of see what's going on. I told you that, the kids would say, your mother's a whore, and I'd say she very well could be. I haven't asked her. When my mom came in one day, and so I looked at her and I said, Mom, David has a question for you. And she's like, what, son? And he goes, I don't have a question for her. I go, yeah, you do. I go, Mom, are you a whore? And she goes, no. Why? And I go, well, because David every day tells me my mother's a whore, and I thought that we would just clear the air, because I told him I never asked you because it seemed kind of personal. And then she looks at him and she goes no, son. And his face was purple. And so when she left, I came back after lunch and he said to me, I can't believe you said that to your mother. And I said, I can't believe you said that about my mother. And he never said it again. And then the interesting thing, when we were having our little circle time, one of the other kids said, my mother is a whore. She works Tamiami Trail, and that's how she supported me and my brother. And whenever anybody says that, it makes me feel bad about my mom. And I can tell you that term, your mother's a whore, was no longer said in my classroom, because the kid really kind of got that empathetic feeling about it. And so you got to confront that bullying. You can't just let it go. And you can't say, oh my God, that kid's such a wimpy, kind of deserves it or whatever. You have to stop it. And you have to just judiciously apply consequences. Punishment should be appropriate and it should be brief. Avoid suspension at all costs unless the kid's really doing something inappropriate. And that is how you do a comprehensive classroom management and do a good learning environment.